So I checked into the Olympic Village where everyone checks in. And it was my first ever Olympics, my Winter Olympic debut. So everyone's like, be careful because it's a very overwhelming environment. And I didn't really know what they meant by that until I got there. And it's like a big kind of exciting party, or like this energetic, like Disneyland type energy that, because everything's free in the Olympic Village. I'm sure the athletes have told you that before, from the vending machines to the Gatorades to the live music festivals to the food court. Everything is free. So it's this bizarre, and it's open 24 hours.
Ever wonder what it's like to be an athlete on the world's biggest stage? And what really goes on inside the village? Let's find out.
Legends with Bevo. The road to Tokyo. Thanks to Anytime Fitness Glenelg. Renelec Electrical Services.
Steph Prem, great to have you on Legends with Bevo, the road to Tokyo. A 5-time Australian champion, and you competed at the Winter Olympics in Vancouver back in 2010. The only Australian to compete in snowboard cross back in 2010. So it's an incredible story. Great to have you on the show. Tell us about your journey growing up from juniors to competing in the Olympics in snowboarding, and I guess where the passion came from.
Thank you so much for having me, Bev. It's I always love talking about my childhood growing up. I guess coming from Australia, especially from Melbourne, being in the mountains is not completely natural for us. It was a little bit like being on the Jamaican bobsled team back in the days when I was on the Winter Olympic team. My passion and joy originally started from my family, who really got into snow sports later in life themselves. So they were very passionate about it. And my dad took up snowboarding in the 80s and he just loved it. And he still snowboards now. He's 67, 68 and he still snowboards. And he took up snowboarding, and I was kind of like the son he never had, I guess. And I used to do a lot of sport with him growing up. And he and my mum got me this tiny little secondhand snowboard and said, give it a try. And up until that moment, I didn't love skiing, but I took up snowboarding and I loved it. And I took to it very naturally. And I guess because I was good at it as a kid, I really liked it. But I didn't take it up until I was about 12 or 13. So it's quite late to take up a sport, really, to then, I guess, go on and professionally compete in that sport. I live quite 4 hours away from our local mountain in Victoria. But we were just, I guess, a passionate family into the hobby sport of skiing and snowboarding. And I as a junior, I started competing and doing quite well. But again, I mean this respectfully, but it's not too hard to be really good in Australia because there wasn't a lot of competition. But I guess I was lucky enough to find out that when I went overseas and started competing, that I turns out I was okay compared to a few other juniors as well. So that's, I guess, where it all began, and a lot of white line fever, and very, very competitive naturally, and always loved sport. And one thing led to another, and I just got to my sort of last couple of years of high school and I was competing, and then I went on to go to university because that's what you do when you finish school. And I got a year into uni and I was just missing the competition so much. And I sort of somehow convinced my family that could I take a year off and just give it a go. And by convinced, I mean I took the year off and went away, and then called them from Canada and said, I think do you mind if I stay here for a while and give it a crack? And, they thought themselves that it probably wouldn't last long, and they might as well let me have a few months to do, at least I was doing sport. They were happy that I was active and I was healthy and I was passionate. So they said, yeah, give it a go. And, turns out I did a little bit better than we all thought.
That's incredible. And what a story it is to, like I mentioned, 2010 at Vancouver, to be the only Australian competing in the snowboard cross. We'll get to that in a moment. But what about, you touched on it about having your dad. That's incredible that he's snowboarding today. Actually makes me feel bad that at 41 I've never snowboarded before, and he's still doing it 20 years older than me, or 25 years older than me. But
we're booked to go on a snowboard trip with my sister and my parents. We do a biannual trip all together. I think that's the wonderful thing about winter sports is it's very ageless, and it's something that I guess I've always really enjoyed doing with my family. So we're going away in a few weeks, and mum's still a really good skier, and my sister and I have gone to the dark side with dad, and we're the snowboarders.
That's great.
And it's just something we really enjoy as a family still, which is nice.
And growing up as a kid, did you watch the Winter and Summer Olympics? And I guess who was your idol growing up, Steph?
Yeah, always watched. I guess I was always pretty passionate about sport, even though the one sport I'm really good at is snowboarding. If you throw a ball at me, I have no hand-eye coordination whatsoever. So, summer sports, unfortunately, was never going to be my calling. But, I was always obsessed with the opening ceremony and the closing ceremonies growing up, and always, I guess, and still to this day, very attracted to elite sports people, and I guess personal performance is what I'm very, very driven by. So, and I was lucky to work with the Steggles. Remember like Zali Steggel and Zeke Steggel back in the day?
Yes.
And they were a sort of a really big inspiration to me early on in my career. In terms of summer sports, I was really lucky to work with Danny Roach. She was one of my mentors, the hockey player, Australian hockey player, and she was one of my mentors in the lead up to the 2010 games. And she worked with me up until I was on the phone to her, the night before my event. She was an incredible mentor, just helping me, I guess, paint the picture of what the games was going to be like, because she'd won a few gold medals and been to a couple of games herself, but in summer sports. But she was just a great, I guess, educator and mentor to me into how to prepare myself as an athlete for an Olympic Games, and really about that headspace, I guess, as a professional athlete.
And take us back to 2010. I know it's a little while ago now, but that feeling when you found out, Steph, that you were going to be competing for Australia in the Winter Olympics, and snowboard cross over there in Vancouver, what was that feeling like? And who were the first people you told?
You're making me feel old now, Bev.
No, not at all.
I guess I think it's one of those memories that will stick in your head till the day you die. But and I think a lot of people don't realise, be it summer or winter, that even though there's 4-year gaps between an Olympic Games, and you're obviously training your ass off in those 4 years, you actually still don't find out that you qualify, or you don't get that official letter from Australia or from your country of representation until about a month out. So you're working very, very hard. And although you know your own qualification and you know your own ability, and you're aware that you're close, but there's still quota spots, and there's still a lot of politics involved in terms of getting yourself over the line. So that countdown to the games is a big one, and that nervous energy that comes with qualifying, actually qualifying for an Olympic Games, is huge. And I missed out in 2006. So I was still on the junior team in 2006, but I was shortlisted for the Olympics, and then I didn't make it. So that hard 4 years from 2006 to 2010 was big. So you can imagine the relief when you finally receive that letter in the mail that says, congratulations, you will be one of however many members of an Olympic team. And I still have that letter framed at home. And if I'm ever having a bad day, I refer to that framed picture, because I just feel like I'm like, well, if I can do that at 23 years of age, then anything's kind of possible. How
good. That's one thing I wish I could have said, that I've been a Winter Olympian. Instead, I'll just interview Olympians. So
it's and it's something that you should never take for granted. I think it's easy to forget about, but it is something that I'm very, very proud of. And it took years of hard work of my life. And, I wasn't number one in the world by no means, but I was top 20 in the world in a very, very difficult sport. And it's something that was, the happiest years of my life being a professional athlete. I loved it so much. And I think that's something that, people work hard for PhDs, and people work hard for, degrees and other things in their life. And for me, that was the 8 to 10 years of my life that I dedicated to sport. And it's something that's had a huge impact on me for years later.
And the opening ceremony, I've heard some stories, the Summer Olympics opening ceremony. Give us a bit of an understanding what it was like, in the opening ceremony for the Winter Olympics, Steph.
It was fantastic. I mean, I compete in an individual event. So for me, I'd never had that sort of team environment or that camaraderie and that spirit before. So walking into a stadium, I guess nothing can really explain to you what comes over you in terms of that patriotic moment, I guess, that I hadn't really had before, of wearing the green and gold and being amongst your teammates and really celebrating those years of hard work of getting to that point. I think until you walk into an opening ceremony, you don't really realize the enormity of it all. And you know, I don't know if you remember there's always something spectacular that someone, you know, everyone remembers. What was her name? Nikki at the Australian Olympics.
Nikki Webster?
Nikki Webster,
Yep.
you know, coming out of the moon. So at the Winter Olympics, it was a snowboarder, like the Olympic rings were lit on fire, and then a snowboarder came out of a jump and jumped through the Olympic rings, you know, and that's,
cool.
I think that's what we remember about Vancouver. And you know, it's just, it's just this magical experience. I kind of like, it's like a Disneyland, you know, for athletes, I guess, like the Olympic Village is also. That opening ceremony kind of tells you that it's real, it's true, it's happening, and I think that's where that kind of rush begins.
And the Olympic Village, I've heard some amazing stories the last couple of months since I've been doing the road to Tokyo, from water fights to 9 McDonald's in Atlanta
Yes.
and all sorts of craziness. What was it like at the Winter Olympics Village? And give us some stories. Was there much of a party scene there, Steph, or?
It was, so it's funny because I had two villages, if that's the best way to explain it. So I checked into the Olympic Village where everyone checks in, and it was my first ever Olympics, my Winter Olympic debut. So everyone's like, be careful because it's a very overwhelming environment. And I didn't really know what they meant by that until I got there. And it's like a big kind of exciting party, or like this energetic, like Disneyland type energy that, you know, because everything's free in the Olympic Village. I'm sure the athletes have told you that before, from the vending machines to the Gatorades to the live music festivals to the food court. Everything is free. So it's this bizarre, and it's open 24 hours. So it's kind of like, you know, Vegas or Disneyland, and everyone's on different time zones. So all these countries are checking in at different times. Everyone's eating at different times. Everyone's trying to get their body clock in the right place for their event. And then you've got this hard battle of you might be in a room with an athlete that's doing your event, but you might be 2 doors down from two athletes from Russia that have just finished their event, and now they've been training for 4 years and they're ready to celebrate. So it is this really high energy that's easy to get caught up in, I guess, as well. So what happened is Australia removed us from the Olympic Village about, I think, 4 or 5 days out from our event, and put us in private homes around Vancouver.
Oh.
We weren't allowed to tell anyone where we were. We were put in these, you know, little safe houses essentially, and we were shuttled between homes and where we would eat and to our event days. And then they hung up pictures in the house of like our families, and they covered up these people's like homes with Australian flags, and like put Vegemite in the pantries and tried to make us feel like we were at home. I think it was an amazing initiative by the Olympic team, the Australian sort of Olympic Committee, to try and make us feel comfortable and less overwhelmed to be able to. We were dealing with some very, very difficult weather conditions at our Olympics too in Vancouver. It hadn't snowed for 3 months. So a lot of our training days were messed around. A lot of, you know, we didn't have enough snow on course, so we didn't get as many days on snow that we would have liked. Days got moved around. So there was a lot of uncertainty anyway. So I think the idea of putting us in these safe houses and putting us in these homes and only interacting with the Australian team was a way of them making us feel like we had some kind of, I guess, routine or certainty leading up to our event.
Was that disappointing, though, not being a part of the actual Olympic Village? Like you mentioned before, that with you not being a part of that party scene and the 24/7 feeling and that sort of thing as well?
Look, we checked back in after our event. So
cool.
I think we got the best of both worlds. And you know, I was really overwhelmed. So I think it was a really good initiative for those few days to be able to just get in the zone and go there and do what we needed to do. And then to be able to go back in afterwards was great, because then I could take my family. My family had obviously flown over to watch me compete, and then I could take them through the Olympic Village. You know, we could eat unlimited amount of chicken nuggets at the free McDonald's and do all like, you know, I didn't drink in the lead up to the games. I didn't, you know, eat junk food. I was very regimented, and that's what helped me, I guess, put me in my best state of mind and best physical, you know, in my best physical state. But, you know, you let your guard down pretty quickly once you've competed at an Olympics. It's amazing how quickly you can be like, well, I've done all the hard work now. And it was nice to be able to enjoy that with other athletes, other friends, other teammates, and of course, my family as well. That was pretty good, yeah.
See, my producer, Rory, that's one of his favourite things. He loves hearing about what meal the athletes have after they've competed. And do you remember, did you have like a massive Big Mac meal, or you mentioned chicken nuggets? Can you remember what your meal was? Did you smash something?
I've not eaten a chicken nugget since, Bevan, because I ate so many chicken nuggets after my event. I have not touched McDonald's or chicken nuggets since 2010. That's how hard I went on the chicken nuggets. I was very upset though. There was no McFlurries in the Olympic Village, which is something I'd still like to take up with McDonald's to this day, because I had been so healthy in the lead up to the games. I was really looking forward to, overdosing on McFlurries after my event, but that wasn't the case. So chicken nuggets was the thing.
Don't blame me on that. McFlurries are amazing. So, oh, that's brilliant.
It's those silly little things, but it is this. I think especially in terms of health and regimen and routine, and I'm sure you've been speaking to so many athletes, everyone's got their weird little tics, right, that we all do, and our ritualistic type behaviour in the lead up to the games, that even just those little things, by letting your hair down at the end, is a lot of fun.
And the actual buzz itself, Steph, we'll speak about the Summer Olympics in a few moments' time, and how sad that's going to be, having no crowds. But what was the atmosphere like competing? I can just imagine it would have been amazing competing at your very first Olympics and just having that crowd going nuts behind you, and your family being there. Just give us a bit of an understanding of what that was like. Yeah,
I mean, it's even just you saying that has given me, goosebumps. I think it takes you back to an amazing energy exchange that you will never, ever really have again in your life. And I haven't, I had an injury 6 weeks after the games, and I've never competed since. So for me, I hold on to those memories, and I hold on to that one Olympic experience. I was very fortunate to compete in Vancouver because there is such an Australian population in Vancouver, in the city. So we had so many Aussies, and this beautiful, I guess, sense of support from back home, even though we're in Canada. And, I never forget, like, there was people that made signs that my surname back then was Hickey, my maiden name. And, there was like Tricky Hickey and Sticky Hickey and all these like hilarious things that people had made up, and school kids that had, chosen you as their athlete to follow for school projects. That it's just these odd things that I will never, ever, have again. And you just, they're pretty special. And obviously my family was there. I've got a very small family, but it was my mum, my dad, my sister, and my best friend. And I've got it framed at home. It's this fluorescent pink sign that just says, "Go, Steph, go." And it was the first thing that I saw when I looked up to the crowd, when I got to the finish line. And it's it's just special thinking about stuff like that, and the support that I got from my family. And then, when you check out of the village, again, you've probably been told this from other athletes, but I never understood that you get a PO box at the Olympics. When you check out, they say to you, "Oh, don't forget to check your PO box." And I said, "Oh, there's no need for me to do that," because I didn't even know I had one. So I didn't let anyone know that I had an address. And they said, "Oh, no, don't worry. We let people know that you have a PO box." And I didn't understand it. And anyway, so I went to this little PO box, and you tell them your name, and I got this envelope full of letters. And it was these primary school kids that had written to me at the games. Oh. And so all these primary school kids from back home in Melbourne or back home in Australia that had, their teacher had told them to pick an athlete and write them a letter, and they send it to you. And it was just the best thing. It was just magical. And the cutest letters, I've still got them. It was just really like very heartwarming, because I didn't have a great deal of support in the lead up to the Olympics. And I didn't, other than my family, I didn't have a lot of people, and, my coach, I didn't really have a lot of people around me, or I didn't think I had a great deal of support. So to come out to these letters and these kids and from, people that had followed you from high school that you just hadn't even thought about it was pretty magical.
I can just imagine that would have been the coolest thing ever. So
yeah, it was the things that kids write too is just so cool. Like,
so cute.
So cute, so cute. Once you get to the top of the mountain, Steph, can you please explain to us how you get down? Anyway, hope you win. Love, John. 13, or 8-year-old from, Kilsyth Primary. It was just the coolest stuff that people write to you. "I've chosen you because you're my favourite athlete because you have a pink snowboard." Love Jenny.
That gives me goosebumps just thinking about it, Steph. So
it was very, very, very funny, but really, really, really heartwarming. Yeah.
We just mentioned it before about the crowds and in Tokyo this year not having any crowds, which is a real sad situation. How would have you dealt with it competing with no crowds behind you there, Steph?
I think this is something I've thought about a lot, and I feel for the athletes. I really do in two ways. One, because they've had to wait an entire extra year to compete, and I always, as a former professional athlete myself, I have no idea if I would have been able to do that, because I just think I worked so hard to get myself in peak physical and mental shape for 2010. Had they have said, now you have to wait to 2011, I just don't know if I would have been in the same state. And then to be told that you can have no crowds, that's not what you train your entire life for to lead up to getting to an Olympics. And it's not about the performance, but a huge, I think, element of being an athlete is that rapport with the crowd and that energy that you get, an electric sort of energy that you feed off on race day. And then you can flip the coin on that too. And for me, I get asked a lot what I heard. What was I hearing, in the start gate before I competed? It's something I get asked a lot. And my answer is always nothing, because I was in the zone. Like it wouldn't have mattered what you said to me. I wouldn't have heard a thing, because I was just in my own thoughts and my own mind and my own sort of internal dialogue. But when I came down for my first and second run, when you cross the finish line in your qualifying, it's like this rush of sound that you get and there was cowbells. Cowbells was a real thing in Vancouver. And it's like you cross that finish line, you go from hearing absolutely nothing and being in tunnel vision to then like coming up for air across the finish line, and then just this roar of a crowd and like the cowbells going nuts. And I'd never had anything like that, especially not in snowboard cross. It was a new event. So, the crowd were loving it. It was something very different that we'd had at like a regular, say, World Cup event in a small, tiny little town in the back of Switzerland. You're not getting that same kind of roaring response that you get at an Olympics. So to not have that, I think is sad as well, because it's also very reaffirming as an athlete, I think, to feel those moments. And to know that it'd be like an actress going to an Oscar, going to the Oscars, like we all saw in COVID. It's not really the same thing,
Yeah, you're right. It's one of those things, isn't it? Because we all want the Olympics to go ahead, and you feel so sorry for athletes. They've already had to wait 12 months, so they can't postpone it for another 12 months. But at the same time, though, how are the athletes going to feel? Say, especially, I think of marquee events like the 100 metres. That's one of my favourite and a lot of people's favourite events. And, you think of the runners there at Distal Macho, flexing their guns and doing all their funny things. And, they feed off the crowd, and not to have a crowd there just seems really sad, doesn't it? But I suppose the most important thing is it's still going ahead. So.
Yeah, like you said, it's those little ritualistic things and those little intrinsic things that the athletes do to get them to G them up, which is, like you said, the crowd feeds off that. But in saying that, I think one of the magical things about sport is the camaraderie and how it brings people together around the world. And that's what an Olympic Games does. And I think as sad as it is for the athletes, and as a former athlete, I can relate, former Olympian, I can relate to not having the crowds, or again, being pushed back again, is something that no one wants. But I think in this uncertain, unprecedented time we find ourselves in, it's a wonderful thing for the world to still be able to have an Olympics. I think it brings people together. It's this wonderful joy and feel good that everyone can be a part of. And I think that's a big, magical part of what the Olympics and what sport does, bringing people together.
Well said. I reckon they'll still get amazing ratings, because there's so many people that I've spoken to that are just pumped for it. Like they want the Olympics to go ahead. They've obviously had to wait now 5 years for it to happen. So yeah, I think it's going to be wonderful, Steph, and just what the world needs at the moment with all the garbage we've been through the last 12 to 24 months.
I couldn't agree more. We need, I think music and sport are two of the only things that can really bring people together the way they do. And I think this is something that we really need right now. And it will bring a lot of joy for people to be able to be invested in these athletes' stories and their backstories, and, how they've trained and how they've got their way to being able to compete in this weird and wonderful world that we live in currently, you know. So I think in terms of network coverage and really learning about the athletes and everything, it's going to be a very interesting one also.
Yes, interesting is an understatement.
Understatement.
And let's get back to, I guess, a sad situation, but you've turned into an amazing one with the recovery from that. And that was your accident in the World Cup, Steph, that ended your career, unfortunately. Explain what happened there. And we all know snowboard cross, it's such a dangerous sport. And not being I guess I'm a little bit biased, but I do love it. It's actually one of my favourite events, the snowboard cross. Like, I think it's just you guys are just so brave, and it's crazy the mayhem that goes on in that actual event. It's definitely become one of my favourites of the Winter Olympics. But yeah, explain what happened with your situation and how you've recovered now to go on to do bigger and better things.
I love hearing that. It was the most watched event at the last Winter Olympics. So it's definitely, I have to say, a challenge being the athlete on the other side of the fence, because it's such a crazy event. But it, you know, brings out all our white line fevers out. But you know, like I said, I was so fortunate and lucky that I trained so hard and qualified for 2010, and then I had an accident. I think it was about 6-7 weeks after the games, or it might have been a little bit further. But sort of, as you know, like the Olympics actually fall in the middle of the season, or the Winter Olympics do. So there's a series of events and World Cup events and finals after the Olympics. And because I hadn't got the result that I wanted at the games, you know, I'd literally missed out by one place, got to go through to the finals in my second qualifying run, and I broke a couple of ribs. So for me, I thought World Cup finals was going to be where I could really get the result that I wanted. I wanted to finish the year on a top 10 result, and I'd had a few 11ths and 12ths that season. So for me, that top 10 was very important. And I went into World Cup finals probably a bit burnt out after the Olympics and a little bit injured, and the course was very treacherous. Long story short, the last jump of the last run of the day, of the last feature before the finish line, my coach had said to me, do not hit this jump unless you know you've got the speed. So in training all morning, I didn't hit it. I'd seen a lot of the girls and even the guys pulling off. So we'd all been running the course at full speed, but waiting for this last jump to speed up a bit because just no one was making the landing. So to give you an idea, a snowboard jump looks like a skateboard ramp, essentially, or like a big wedge. And then you would fly yourself off that jump, you know, at a certain speed, knowing what the distance is that you have to gap. And I was trying to clear about a 20-meter distance. So it's not something you can mess around on. It was about a 60-foot jump. So, you know, there's not a lot of room for error. Hence why my coach had said, do not hit that jump unless you know you've got the speed under your feet. And it was my last training run of the day, and I had to compete, you know, an hour or so later. So with 4 other people around me in a border cross event. So I was like, I need to hit this jump. And I came around the last turn. I thought I had the speed. I did, to be fair. I did. I've run this event in my head many times. I definitely had the speed. What I hadn't taken into account was, in that heat of the moment, was the fact that we had all been pulling off the course all day. So it had left a big dent in the takeoff of the jump. And I just hit the dent, and it took a lot of speed out of my feet, out of my board. But in my head, I'd already committed to hitting the jump. So I just thought, oh, you know, stuff it, I'll go for it. And then I literally got in the air and realized I didn't have the speed to make the jump. And it was, you know, my physio explains it like falling out of a first floor building to concrete. I just like stopped dead in the air, missed the transition, came down flat. Essentially, my entire left-hand side of my body took the impact of the fall, and I had a horrific accident where I fractured my spine in multiple places and did severe damage to my pelvis, and had severe spinal whiplash and tore my hamstring and dislocated my pelvis. And so the lower lumbar spine injury was quite severe, and it's essentially the reason why I had to stop snowboarding professionally from that day forward, as much as I tried to come back from it. But it was a 5-year rehabilitation journey, physically and mentally, to come back from that injury. So it was a very, very hard impact injury, coming from a very high height to a very, very flat and hard landing.
Sounds like you're lucky to survive that, because horrific from the injuries that you suffered. Could have been a hell of a lot worse. And good to hear that you can still snowboard today, Steph, without the jumps, of course.
Yes, exactly. I do. I consider myself very grateful. I obviously had to take 2 years off my snowboard after the accident, which nearly killed me. But I was way too insistent in my rehab too. I was very naughty, and I always tried to get back on snow earlier, and I tried to push myself too hard in the gym. And I still, 10 years later, I still have severe chronic pain and muscle imbalance and things that I will probably have to deal with for the rest of my life. But I'm so grateful that I'm back snowboarding recreationally, and I can still go snowboarding with my family. And that took a long time to sort of reframe all of that, and a lot of sports psychology. But as much as I miss the thrill of the chase of competition, because that's what I loved, snowboarding has always been my passion. So I'm grateful that I can be back doing that. And I did a lot of clinical Pilates to sort of get me through. That was really the only thing that got me back. And after many, many years of doing clinical Pilates, that is what got me back on my feet and got me back snowboarding. I ironically decided to then go and open up a bunch of Pilates businesses myself. And it sort of ended up being the springboard to the next sort of part of my career following sport.
Yeah, so it's Studio PP, which is your business. So it's going great guns. You're one of Australia's biggest businesses in terms of health and wellness. Explain more about that, Steph.
Yeah, so PP sort of stemmed from something I said I was passionate about earlier, which is like, I guess, personal performance or premium performance, being the best version of yourself and getting the most out of your body. And that looks different to everybody. And it goes beyond, I guess, the Pilates, but it's looking at health, holistically, mentally, physically, emotionally, and sort of applying that mindset of an athlete, or those transferable skills from sport into sort of everyday health and well-being. And people seem to really, really love it. So I've opened a couple of studios in Victoria, but I also do a lot of online training, and I work with a lot of athletes to this day, and a lot of business leaders and a lot of CEOs and people that, operate at that sort of premium and high level and are looking to sort of take themselves to that next level. And it's been the silver lining. Absolutely. It's been something that's really, really helped me, I guess, transition out of that very hard sort of mental and physical stage of leaving sport and kind of finding my feet again and being able to put, I guess, all this energy that I have. And as only my sports psychologist could say to me at the time, she's like, we really need to put this energy somewhere else when I left sport. So that turned into becoming about business. And I'm very, very grateful that I got to commentate the last 2 Olympics as well. So I've been able to, I guess, somehow give back to sport and stay involved in a sport that I'm very, very passionate about, and be able to commentate, some winning runs and some amazing runs by friends from the industry and ex teammates and ex athletes that I used to be side by side in the gate with. I've now been able to call them on 2 Olympics. So it's been a different, career little journey since professional sport that I didn't expect, but it's been a pretty great one.
I do love your energy, and I've obviously heard you commentate. You're a gun, and you also do motivational speaking, which is understandable because you speak so well. How can people book you, Steph, and tell us more about the motivational speaking?
Oh, thank you. It's something I'm very, very passionate about. I was born with a very, I guess, rare and, infectious case of optimism and enthusiasm. And it's something I enjoy sharing. My website's the best place to find me is just stephprem.com.au. And you can obviously find me at studiopp.com.au as well.
Wonderful. Well, what an absolute pleasure it's been to have you on Legends with Bevo, the road to Tokyo. Thanks for joining us today, Steph. And a big shout out and thank you to your PR person or direct manager, Renata. Is that the best way to put it? I don't know how to explain. Renata.
Who put us in touch. It's wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, Bevan. It's been an absolute joy.
No, it's been awesome, and look forward to speaking again in the future and hopefully get to meet you one day and thank you in person. So, and hey, how exciting, the Olympics not too far away as well.
I know, I was going to say, enjoy Tokyo, enjoy the games. It's going to be very, very exciting for us all to watch.
Bring it on and keep up the great work. Love your enthusiasm and your energy. It's awesome.
Straight back at you. Thanks, legend.
Thank you.